My name is Alex Wesser. I'm the Executive Director of Protect Protesters. We are a donation-based nonprofit organization applying for our nonprofitcy, who is really based out of experiencing the protests, originally going in our SUV and realizing that we could use that SUV as an advantage, both as a physical barrier to protect protesters and as a vehicle that could provide supplies to those on foot. I have a long background in sociology and photography, which has really led me to a really beautiful marriage of both activism and whatever that action looked like, as well as maintaining creativity in my own life. I'm a queer woman. I am Latino and Native American and white, but I am incredibly white passing. So I've had quite a storied history in how I relate to the world around me, as everyone does. Mutual aid is such an interesting concept. For a long time, to my understanding, right, there's a lot of people who haven't understood what that term means, who haven't understood how they may possibly benefit from it, and who may even be opposed or have experienced some sort of opposition to it, especially in a capitalist society in which accepting aid, accepting mutual support from your communities has often been something looked down upon or something that is only for those who are not capable, willing, or able to work for themselves. I think that paradigm and that misunderstanding is really rooted in American history, but is also quite a misunderstanding truly at its core. As a community that is built off of diversity, is built off of people from different opportunity stances, from different socioeconomic backgrounds, and of course from different colors, races, genders, ages, the ability to come together and to support your community is actually an incredibly powerful thing. What's really interesting about that is, for the first time, especially during a pandemic, especially during this really beautiful movement of revolution that's happening right now, that's been a continued fight forever, but that's continuing to really gain traction now. For the first time, we're seeing people who never knew they needed aid before, wanting to accept that aid, whether that's in the form of government support from a stimulus check, whether that's needing to be on unemployment as a person who never expected you would be on unemployment, or needing to have access to food, have access to things that you may never have needed in the past and never expected that your family would need to benefit from. So there's this really amazing thing happening with those who are providing mutual aid, encountering people and being able to have conversations for the first time about why this resource, why community involvement, why involvement from everyone is incredibly important, helpful, and necessary, not just now, but for anyone who may have needed it from any background in the future, past or present. So Protect Protesters was started by myself and my two co-founders, Emily Carroll, my partner, and Billy Gaffney, a queer man. We all live in Bushwick after spending 70, 80, I don't know how many days at that point, completely quarantined in our basement, and being people with long histories of activism and wanting to stand up, speak, uplift, whatever that looked like through a number of different movements, conversations. There became this moment in which everyone was going to the streets, and I think initially everyone had this hesitation or this bared guilt to say, I'm perhaps afraid. I've been afraid to go to my bodega. I've been afraid to go to the grocery store during daylight. I've been afraid to get on the subway, things that were so normal for me. How can I in any way confidently stand behind using that as an excuse to not show up in this moment, right? Using that fear to say, I'll support from home. I'll support by sharing things and donating to community bail funds. And as a group, we decided we have an SUV, which is an incredible opportunity to have in New York City. Not a lot of people have cars, but we do have one. And we wanted to use that as a way to initially even just be involved in any way. So that first day started with us getting in our SUV, going to the protest simply to be there, driving the SUV in the middle of roads, using it sort of as a way to block off police and other people, getting out of our sunroof and holding our signs and being there in solidarity, but within our car. Really quite amazing, because that work transformed only moments later when a really beautiful woman stopped us and she said, hey, are you continuing to follow the march? And we said, yeah, absolutely. We're going to be in our SUV. We're going to follow them all day. She said, I have like 200 sandwiches that I just made at my house with my children. Would you mind taking them for me and making sure that they get to protesters? And it was a done deal. It was absolutely, of course, we will take them for you. And we took water from her. We got her contact information and said, please let us know if we can help you get anything out. we would love to continue to do this work. And that's really how this was born, was simply by a community interaction with a Black woman and her family saying, I want to get food to the protesters, and us saying, we want to help you do that work. Well, there are a few things that I really want to make sure I at least say, and that is that intersectionality, the understanding that every single person has multiple boxes that they could check off, right? Often we're given a box at a doctor appointment or on a census perhaps, right? And there's really only one option. You're either white or you're of Hispanic origin or you're Black or you're whatever it is. And then there's that, all telling other box that so many of us fall into. And to ignore the existence of intersectionality, to ignore that most people do not have one box, right? Especially in that situation. Those are pertaining to race, but we all fit into multiple, and to ignore intersectionality is the erasure of most people's history. For example, I fit into a white box, but I also fit into a Native box. I also fit into a Latino box, and so many people that I know fit into multiple of those as well. But that's only one consideration. That's not taking into account that I am also a female. That's not taking into account that I'm also queer. That's not taking into account that I am also cisgendered, which is different from both of those things, being a woman and being queer. So understanding that is the first basis of understanding the history that led us here, that led us to this exact moment in 2020, and that makes it so important for people to understand that no matter where you come from, regardless of what privilege you may or may not be aware that you have, you also fit into multiple boxes, and you also have multiple things that pertain to you, and that harried history of every single person's individual experience is going to be different no matter who you are. In the queer community, right, we can have people who exist under an umbrella, we can have queerness, but that experience is inevitably different for white gay males as it is for Black trans people of the community. And same within in race, right? We know that things exist that Black people can fit under this one umbrella, but that's completely erasing the history that differs between Black women, between Black men, and again, between Black people who might fall into different gender categories or sexuality categories. For those reasons, I think it's incredibly helpful, not only for us to do the work to understand for ourselves how that means we can use every single instance of our box or our experience to stand and uplift others, but why that makes us closer than really anybody at all. The divisions between anyone, depending on where you fall in any of those categories, is really the biggest sense of unity in understanding that we all have multiple categories to uphold. And mutual aid specifically, and community responsibility to be able to say, I am just one sole member of this community, and regardless of any number of things that have fallen on me as sanctions from the society, whether I experience privilege or disadvantage in any number of those ways, still makes me akin to everyone in this community, no matter what that community is, as someone who has a history with multiple different sanctions from society that are upon me and things that I need to act upon. Mutual aid exists as an idea in really large blanket terms. Mutual aid is just the responsibility and the space to say whatever resources we have can be equally distributed wherever they're needed, or perhaps unequally distributed to those who are needing them, because we know that there are groups that in any given moment need support more than others. Charities exist as a space to say, we're going to take all of this resource, we're going to take all of these donations, and we're going to give them to one specific mission. Mutual aid understands that mutual is the core of that, right? And that there are so many different things that may or may not need support at any given time. And without one direct group to be giving that resource to, mutual aid has the responsibility to say, we are going to collect resources, we're going to organize resources, whether those are voices, posts, food, water, money, whatever that looks like, and understand that that is for truly the community at large, is truly for whatever group in that community exists, rather than a charity that may have one directive, one mission, and one mission that doesn't take into account that that mission is ever changing, that that mission is different for every single person that might fall under the umbrella of need for that specific mission. I think that's really the kind of heart and difference in mutual aid to charity and how those two can relate in getting resources to the community. Speaking of queer liberation, again, queer is such a large word that can encompass anyone who does feel like they fit under that. As a queer woman, and again, as a queer woman who is feminine, who is passing cisgendered, who is passing in all of these ways, and that exists, my sexuality has often been completely disregarded. It's, you know, you run into situations in which you have men that are like, oh, you're not really like a lesbian, right? In which your response is just, yes, I am. Sorry, you can't believe it, but it's true, you know? And that moment for every single person in which someone else finds the power to say that whatever your identity is, whether it's something that you can see, like the color of your skin or the way that you present, or something that they don't know, right, and what you prefer in the bedroom and your personal relationships and the way in which you relate to the world, the moment that someone decides that that experience is invalid simply because they don't understand it, because they don't want to understand it perhaps, or because it's something they don't necessarily believe in, like bisexuality or any of the number of umbrellas and places in which I found myself, that is the moment in which you truly understand that specific liberation for whatever person that may be is incredibly important. So I've spent a long life of constantly being invalidated for bisexuality, for enjoying women, for then having a relationship with a man that I enjoyed greatly, for being in relationships with people who were transgendered and people not being even understand what that scope looks like. And it boils down, I think, to a number of conversations that we all have, right? We have catchphrases, love is love, whatever that looks like, and it's just really true, right? And that's different for every single person. The biggest point being that often what can be seen, again, gender, how you present, is completely separate from sexuality and what you perhaps enjoy, which is also completely different between what you might want as a personal relationship. You know, you might enjoy something sexually that is completely different than something you actually want to experience as a lifelong partnership. You may present in any way that you choose on any given day because you can, and that's amazing. And it's not really it shouldn't ever really exist as a marker of not only who you are, but how it's someone else's responsibility to understand you. Queer liberation has existed, again, like most things, as this movement that a lot of people may not understand unless they fall into any specific category. And again, that is different for every single person who may be under that queer umbrella. Queer liberation for gay white males is different for queer liberation from Black lesbians, right? And that history has often fallen under just even what political movements look like, right? Making sure that anyone who might fall under that category can adopt children, can be married, can even be comfortable in public. But queer liberation at large, foremost, should be indebted and credited to Black trans lives that specifically in a very potent moment, we're only liberating for themselves to be comfortable in their space, but we're liberating against systems of oppression that had long completely erased them from the narrative, right? Against police brutality, and also against the larger queer community that completely discounted them. You know, queer liberation began, people could debate, but we do know that Marsha P. Johnson's an amazing woman who threw this brick, who started the story. And quickly after that, we had marches and things in which she and her friends and anybody else in the Black queer community, Black trans community specifically, any trans community of color, was completely discounted and continues to be discounted from the conversation of queer liberation and of queerness in general. That face can't exist without those bodies that are so incredibly vital to this movement and to the message. And queer liberation is specifically a space in which that needs to be recognized, in which that needs to be understood, celebrated, and that doesn't just look like transformations on paper, right? We can have someone put a rainbow flag on the White House, not now, but we can have, you know, NASCAR fly a pride flag at their races, which is an amazing movement, but those are all small actions. Every action is incredibly important, of course, big or small, but part of understanding queer liberation is not just that those moments, right, that moment where someone speaks out or that moment where we get one law passed exists, but truly a movement and a moment in which those bodies, no matter who they are, no matter what space they fall into under the greater word queer, is able to live in a world where all of those things are accounted for, are given, are not things we're any longer fighting for, and exist as bigger spaces for us to live lives every single day, right? To live a life where going to the store, just because, gay people can get married, that doesn't change that someone may be completely treated differently and receive hate in any interaction in their daily life. So I do hope and imagine a space in which queer liberation, along with all of the other liberation that needs to happen for every single person, no matter where they fall on that spectrum, no matter where they fall on a racial spectrum, no matter where they fall on a gender spectrum, is living a life truly equal, comfortable, protected, understood, and even if not understood, attempting to be understood. The word tolerate becomes really hard and problematic, and it's not about tolerating, it's about understanding that we are here, that we exist, and that we exist with every right that every other person who is born into this world with no choice of their own has those same rights. It's really exciting to be showing up at Reclaim Pride today. We spent many weeks showing up at every event that we possibly could, but there are a number of organizations around the city who are performing this mutual aid, who are making sure they show up in any way that looks like. We originally started Protect Protesters as a small crew and quickly realized that there were so many people who wanted to be able to show up who perhaps could not, in whatever way that looked like, right? Who were finding themselves, as I spoke earlier, bearing a little bit of that guilt of saying, I can't be at the actual protest, what can I do? Or specifically to be someone who is not a person of color to say, I want to be there, but I understand that it's important that my voice isn't the leading voice, but rather an echo of every other voice that is there and that needs to be heard specifically as a forefront of this movement. And Protect Protesters and a number of other organizations. I would really love to shout out Black Chef Movement, who is out today. They will be at the end of the march near Washington Square Park. A really incredible movement started by Rashida and Kayla, two really amazing Black female chefs who quickly realized we need to be creating a space where we can, the one thing we know is food. What can we do to support this movement other than marching as women with children and lives? What can we be doing? And they decided we can cook and we can cook well, and brought food to the streets to fuel and support protesters. Additionally, they then grew that network and said, we're two Black chefs, but there are amazing Black chefs all around this, the city, the world, right, at large. How do we ensure that we can also get their food, this beautiful, rich food, right, to the people who need to have it? So I want to shout out Black Chefs Movement. They are out there today. You can absolutely get involved with them. They currently have a GoFundMe attempting to get a larger space, a larger actual commercial space where they can continue to have Black chefs around New York City who can gather, who can perhaps teach community cooking courses, who can make sure that food is available, not just for this movement, not just for these marches, but in the future years for any protest, gathering, whatever that looks like, food for the community fueled by Black chefs. We also are working with People's Bodega. They organically started doing similar things to Protect Protesters. They have a cargo van and one other car. They are also a small team, but they've been working with Mobilize Astoria to collect any donations from the community and to ensure that those get out to protesters. I want to shout them out. They are out there today. Protect Protesters specifically, we do have 4 cars that are out today. They will be following the march. Our style has really been to make sure that we can both hit those at the beginning and to make sure we still have supplies for those who are coming later. Some of these marches have been 20 blocks long. I know we're looking like a huge turnout today, so we are out there supporting. The best way to get involved, Protect Protesters does exist solely right now on Instagram. We are working mainly off of that platform, and then we have a number of other systems set up in which we are collecting donations from the community. We have a number of roles that are incredibly helpful. We are always looking for cars that are willing and able to stop by one of our 2 headquarter locations. We have one in the Lower East Side as well as one in Bushwick, in which we collect all of these donations, both for food and for money, and make sure that they're fully stocked for any car that would like to stop by, completely supply up, make sure that you have feminine hygiene, sunscreen, earplugs, food, water, snacks, anything you might need, face shields, any other protective, it changes daily what's needed in the street for sure, and definitely changes depending on who is showing up and how they are. But if you go to our Instagram, you can absolutely please direct message us, our executive director. That's me. We'll respond to you in any way to let you know all the different roles in which you can help. We need drivers every single day who can go and bring these supplies to the street. We need drivers who can do Costco runs for us or facilitate just pickups within their communities of those that want to donate supplies but aren't able to bring them to our headquarters. And we can always use volunteers to have extra hands on the ground for especially big days like today. Juneteenth, we put out over 8,000 water bottles and over 600 sports drinks. And that was all based off of those who showed up and said, I want to be extra hands in the ground. That's always helpful. Everyone needs it, and we're all here together. And most important thing is that our specific group, protesters, our group of mutual aid and of nonprofit and of trying to find a way to be involved, was an opportunity to ensure that if you could not show up in whatever that looked like, there was still a way you could support the protests. I would absolutely encourage every single person, whether it is supporting and following us, supporting and following Black Chefs Movement, supporting and following People's Bodega, or any number of organizations that have popped up to exist to supply whatever that looks like, whether it is direct supplies, food, water, snacks, protection, whether it is just to be a body in a space, or if it's to be the person who continually posts 100 posts a day about everything that's happening and shares this world. The phrase, right, amplify Black voices, and this thing that we've been saying is specifically to do that. It is to ensure that once one person has said something, especially somebody who is a leader in this movement, especially someone whose voice matters the most in this time, to again, not to speak over them, but to be an echo, to make sure that more people are being able to understand the work that's being done, to make sure that you have the conversations that might be incredibly tough with people who are in your community who don't understand. One of the things that I've been completely hinged on is, in my circle, in my community, there are on my Instagram, on my social media, there are so many beautiful people, and I'm seeing all these posts, and I know that the people that they're reposting to are also seeing these posts, and we're all people that are in agreement upon what this needs to look like, what needs to happen. How do we infiltrate and get that information to people who are not seeing our posts because they don't follow us, because they don't want to understand Black Lives Matter, they don't want to understand any of this greater conversation? How do we infiltrate that? And one of the biggest things that I can say is to, in addition to continuing to share the information with those around you who are part of your community that know, agree, and are with you behind this movement, have those small conversations. Have the conversations that need to happen. Call out racism or anything that you don't agree in, right? Regardless of racism, call out anything that you don't agree in your grocery store when you watch it happen, to your mother, who it might be incredibly hard to have that conversation with. Those things are incredibly important. It's the only way that we can continue to get to more people to actually understand this and to truly be one unified voice, amplifying those that need to have that opportunity.